That was Rifat's ground report. We got more news. The IDF, or the Israeli Defense Forces, have begun a series of strikes in western Iran, marking a significant escalation. Additionally, this morning, the IDF struck missile launchers ready to launch towards Israeli territory. Now, Israel has also borne the brunt of Iranian counter-strikes or Iranian strikes, and their air defense systems have been repeatedly breached by the ballistic missiles like Sejil and others that have been launched by the Iranians. Soldiers in the Iranian armed forces now we are given to understand that Israel has swiftly moved to neutralize launchers that launched the missiles towards the Israeli territory, and this happened a short while ago. Akanksha joining us with more details. Despite Israeli claims that they've wiped out nearly half of the capability, missile launching capability of the Iranians, Iran continues to strike Israel at will, and they have breached their defense systems, air defense systems repeatedly.
Absolutely, they have. The Iron Dome, in fact, its defense capabilities have also been significantly impacted, Anand, in the past few days, ever since Israel began its airstrikes on June 13. But having said that, even the nuclear facilities, how much of a damage has actually been borne by them is the big question right now. Because remember, the Iranian broadcasters in fact, the state broadcaster has come up with a statement. They're saying that they had already removed their staff from the nuclear facilities, A. B, they had also removed much of their nuclear material in these three facilities, particularly the one at Fordow. But how much of an impact has this had? In fact, Iran continues to undermine the impact of the attacks that have taken place. But there is a significant escalation, as you've already highlighted. Iran has already rained their missiles on Israel. In fact, there's been a widening of the entire conflict. As we are seeing, Israel is also now responding, which has led to an escalation ever since the US strikes began. How long will this conflict now continue is the other key question. What is going to be the end game? Another one, what will be the impact for the entire globe? How are fuel prices going to be impacted? These are all questions that we'll have to look at. But as far as the Israeli response is concerned, this is no longer a preemptive strike as was being maintained by Prime Minister Netanyahu when he began striking Iran. And remember, they had called for a US intervention, saying that they only wanted US to intervene as far as hitting those nuclear facilities are concerned. Will US now continue with its involvement is the other big possibility that we'll have to look at.
Well, thanks for your inputs, Akanksha. We'll continue to track the stories. Akanksha, Siddhant, tracking the international developments. There is the Israeli point of view. There is the Iranian point of view. There is also the American point of view. The Russians will also be now watching very, very closely. Russia has already come out and said that any regime change attempted in Iran is unimaginable. What's going to happen if this continues to brew? There is also the trade angle. That entire region, the Hormuz Straits, the Gulf region, the Suez Canal, all of that, will trade be impacted? This region, how much of it will it come back to hurt Bharat? That's another point. Although the oil minister has come out and said that our energy needs will be met, we would look at other options because Bharat continues to buy a huge amount of crude from Iran. But will it turn towards Russia? Will it turn towards China? Lots of angles and lots of questions that arise, and we are going to try and track all of them, and if not more, and bring you other perspectives too, here on this continuous rolling coverage on CNN News 18. Lieutenant General Harimon Iyer joins us. He's a former Chief of Staff, Northern Command. Namaste, Jai Hind, General Sahab. Your thoughts? Your thoughts on this entire development? The US jumping into it. Trump, did he play the bluff by saying, I'll wait 2 weeks? And did they do it? Or are these strikes just as a warning, even as the Iranians seem to be sitting down on the negotiation table? The Iranian foreign minister was in Europe. He was meeting the three European nations. And there was talk that Iran may be amenable to perhaps some kind of a deal. And that's when these strikes happen here. What's going on?
Yeah, thank you for getting me on your show. Firstly, I feel these strikes will not be just demonstrative. They will have some end results in sight. Possibly, Fordow was one reactor which I felt Israel could not do much because of their depth in which these tunnels were. And they needed the Americans to step in. There's been something which has been continuously asked for by Israel. And to my knowledge, even if Iran can keep saying that, only superficial damage happened, if the mother of all ordnance has been used, which apparently it has been, and if three or four, as people are saying, have been used, I personally presume that there will be considerable damage to the facility. It possibly would even end up closing down those tunnels, making them inaccessible to people for a considerable period of time. How much is these are possible issues that we'll have to keep analyzing based on future imageries. I'm sure the Americans have satellites which are looking into it, and in due course of days you will keep getting to know what is the kind of damage this particular facility has had. The fact that they have used Tomahawk cross missiles in the other two facilities indicate that they were not looking at deep strikes in these areas. Possibly they were looking at removing those elements which possibly will help shifted uranium to be stored. So if the Iranians are saying that they have shifted the materials out, they have finite places where they could have moved them, and I'm sure all of them would have been targeted had this been a planned targeted package the way the president of the United States mentioned in the morning. So first part of what you said, I feel we'll have to wait. In the coming days, we'll come to know how much damage they have actually been able to achieve. With the scientists being taken out in a manner by the Israelis, when you cumulate everything together, it constitutes a huge damage to the Iranian nuclear program per se. At least they would have been pushed back, if nothing, by 5 to 10 years, which is possibly what Israel may have been, hedging their bets on, because it possibly denies them capability to assemble weapons which can cause problems for Israel. So all this will come up in due course of time, and I'm sure there will be more clarity as days go by. It's a little too early for us to decide how much damage.
The Russians had come out and said, General Harimona here, that some of their scientists were also present on ground in some of these nuclear facilities, and they were worried for their safety. Now, if there is some damage to any of the Russian scientists, or if there is a loss of lives, will Russia be forced to intervene? Because then it becomes a matter of protecting Russian interests and Russian lives for President Putin. So far, they've just said that any regime change or political upstaging of the Ayatollah Khamenei is unimaginable. That's what they have focused on. And they've also said you're millimeters away from nuclear disaster. The other point is this enriched uranium. I was speaking to General Pandey, and General Pandey said that one has to understand that the Fordow nuclear facility is deep down, but it's L-shaped. The tunnel is L-shaped. So it's not just that one bunker buster can actually take it out. So how does that happen? Because the Israelis believe as long as there is enriched uranium on Iranian soil, there is a problem. The Americans also believe that.
So in case the access to this enriched uranium has been closed, which in all probability would have been, because even if it's an L-shaped tunnel, the entry and exit points would have been targeted, and I'm sure before the attack of this nature has been taken up, they would have done a huge amount of target analysis before finalizing on the DMPI where these bombs will fall. So I will assume that the access to this enriched uranium, if it is still there in the Fordow nuclear plant, will not be accessible for a considerable period of time, because whatever, even if IAEA says there is no radiation per se on the surface, there will be some radiation in the tunnels, and I don't think they can be accessed in the near course of time. So there are problems there. And as far as the Russian angle which you mentioned, it's a tricky question, because though they are mentioning there were Russian scientists working, I don't think Russia would like to overtly be part of any weapons program for Iran, because it puts them in a kind of a compromising position. So they will play this game to the surface level, because they will try and get some dividends out of it in their war against Ukraine. They will try and put pressure to release American support to Ukraine. They will hedge their bets towards that side rather than getting into a conflict over Iran. Even if you recollect, Putin earlier mentioned that he is not in a position to give Iran weapons. So I don't think Russia currently, the way it is engaged in Ukraine, it possibly is not likely to get into a wider conflict. Right. And I don't think the Americans also, as the way the president mentioned in a statement, he has warned that there are other targets, which means that those targets are under surveillance and the target systems are mapped. The assets have already been identified to engage those targets. It's a warning to the Iranians. Those targets could be nuclear targets, those targets could be economic targets, and those targets could be political targets.
Correct.
But it's a veiled kind of threat which the president has given to the Iranians. And possibly it is a kind of a warning, don't retaliate on our basis, which the Iranians had threatened earlier, that should the Americans come into this conflict, they will end up, being a threat to all their bases
Right.
in the Middle East. So it is kind of a veiled threat given by the Americans.
Ji.
I don't see those targets being engaged unless forced to. What I feel is, having done this, the matter has been handed back to the Israelis. You carry on with your operations. Should their regime change, if at all happens, it will be based on actions taken
We'll
by
come to the political and economic dynamic in a bit. Let's just stay on with the military theater of action.